in mind. But I started the answer to Job earlier this morning. I read about, I don't know, 18 pages. So I'm going to try to get through a little more of it. It's really interesting. Actually, this is super fascinating to me as a person who has a background in religious studies and theology. Basically, right now I have no idea what Jung, like where Jung is going to go with this. I can't really anticipate it. I would imagine he would look at the book of Job, like the story of Job, in a very like psychological way, as Job and God are not necessarily two different entities, but two different aspects within our psyches, sort of relating to each other in a particular dynamic that I don't know, might be like unhealthy and needs improvement, or is just like difficult but on the road to individuation. But right now he's kind of doing a psychological profile of Job. And from what he's saying, he's really kind of portraying the Hebrew God as like someone who's diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And I say that just because I've done a lot of research on that particular disorder, and I'll give you some examples. Um, let's see. So he basically, I wish I would have like double underlined this to like see the quotes. Okay, just there's like noise out there. Let me see if I can just like remember it from my own thoughts. Basically, the Hebrew God is one that has within themselves the ultimate good ability to do good, like perform miracles and love human beings, but also be unjust and, like destroy human beings in a flood and get angry and get jealous. And so the Hebrew God is really a God that has like both poles of good and evil within um, themselves. And so, because I guess like the story of Job is basically based on the premise of Job was in very good relationship, close, intimate relationship with the Hebrew God, very faithful, and then also just being really blessed with riches and wealth. And I guess riches and wealth are the same thing. Children, family, admiration, etc. But then Satan comes to God and says, hey, well, maybe this person is just faithful and worshiping you because their life is really great. So what if you make their life really horrible and see if they still are following you? And God was like, okay. And so then Job had like horrible diseases and illnesses and physical suffering and mental and spiritual suffering, and like I think his children died, his like all his animals died. He was just in like the worst place ever. um and so basically this is I think Jung is saying, like, when you read it, it feels very problematic, because there's this test. But I guess the reason that I say feel it's like giving narcissism is that, well, he says right here as a preference, like this, or as a preface, this will be good. By this, so I do not mean to say that Yahweh is imperfect or evil like a Gnostic demiurge. He is everything in its totality. Therefore, among other things, he is total justice and also its total opposite. But yet there's a very specific personality that Jung is pointing out as well, besides just like embracing the duality. So Jung says, existence is only real when it is conscious to somebody. That is why the creator needs conscious man, even though from sheer unconsciousness, he would like to prevent him from becoming conscious. I think earlier Oh, okay, here. The character thus reveals, like the character of God, fits a personality who can only convince himself that he exists through his relation to an object. Such dependence on the object is absolute when the subject is totally lacking in self-reflection and therefore has no insight into himself. It is as if he existed only by reason of the fact that he has an object which assures him that he is really there. And that is like the cornerstone of narcissistic personality disorder, like someone with NPD basically can't connect on a very mature level with anyone. They desire constant sort of mirroring or constant evidence that they have control over the people that they're relating to, and they are just kind of vampirically like sucking energy, like, and they have to always sort of have their egoic needs met, um, to have any feeling of like self-worth or safety. And so that's kind of what it sounds like Jung is saying about the Hebrew God. So it says that is why Yahweh needs acclamation of a small group of people. Now, I don't know if Jung is setting this personality psychological profile of the Hebrew God up to respond. I'm sure he's going to respond to it. The answer to Job is like over 100 pages. So there's quite a long way to go after the psychological profile, which I feel as if like can't go on forever. So anyway, Yahweh needs the acclamation of a small group of people. Um, one can imagine what would happen if this assembly suddenly decided to stop the applause. There would be a state of high excitation with outbursts of blind destructive rage, which is so what NPDs do. Then a withdrawal into hellish loneliness and the torture of non-existence, followed by a gradual reawakening of an unutterable longing for something, which would, I think, ideally would be a word that you would insert here, make him conscious of himself. So that's kind of what would happen if you went no contact, if everyone sort of a bit like woke up and realized how they were being psychologically abused and they went no contact and abandoned the narcissist would, well, either find other supply and just continue on in like a victimhood. But if there's no one there to be supply for the narcissist, there's going to be a breaking down and a potential opportunity for confrontation with the self. And then hopefully, like ideally, this could be a transformative point where they say, well, there's no one around. I have to look at myself. I have to maybe find self-worth from within and validation from within instead of manipulating and gaslighting people and abusing them psychologically to get that validation externally. So there's like an opportunity for growth, but it's just interesting that he's talking about like this deity like that. And he says that the special providence which singled out the Jews from among the divinely stamped portion of humanity and made them the chosen people had burdened them from a start with a heavy obligation. And he talks about how uh, the Jewish people like tried to break away from this connection. So it's kind of like I see in that kind of like the golden child or the worship of the supply. Because when you are basically in a relationship with a narcissist, there's going to be a period of love bombing. And that period basically gives you a taste of narcissistic supply. Like you are the golden child, you are going to be worshipped in a sense. Like when I was dating someone who was, I believe, should be diagnosed as such. The problem is that people with narcissistic personality disorder, like, rarely are authentic in therapy or go to therapy long enough to really understand their diagnosis. Like some will, of course, but like a lot of them will just avoid therapy because think anything's wrong with him. But he was always, basically would critique everybody else, like in front of me, like talk poorly about everyone. But he would, even though he was manipulating and gaslighting me, he would sort of, I think, like try to make me feel like I was like a Victoria's Secret model. Like there would be like praise or like just this idea that it was like us against the world in a sense. And I might be drawing from another sort of like non-romantic relationship I had with also a narcissist. There have been a few in my life. And so it's a really strange kind of thing. But I think like in a relationship with a narcissist, like every sort of tactic is used. Um, and then there's also in the psychological profile of a narcissist paranoia, which Jung brings out on page 537. It is amazing to see how easily Yahweh, quite without reason, had let himself be influenced by one of his sons by a doubting thought. So I think one of his sons might be like Satan, and made unsure of Job's faith, faithfulness. I thought I was going to say faithlessness. With his touchiness and suspiciousness, the mere possibility of doubt was enough to infuriate him and induce that peculiar double-faced behavior of which he had already given proof in the Garden of Eden. When he pointed out, and again, we're talking about God, when he pointed out the tree to the first parents and at the same time forbid them to eat of it, which is funny because that's kind of mentioned. I've been watching Good Omens on Amazon Prime for like, I guess like the second or third time. I don't know. It's just, I really like that show. And I know it's based off of a book, but I haven't read the book. But they kind of mention that like David Tennant, who's playing the fallen angel, so who becomes Satan, is like, well, like, why didn't God like put the tree up on a mountain where they couldn't see it? Like he just like put it out there and like basically, isn't he supposed to be omnipotent? Didn't he know what would happen? Why wouldn't he, it's like there are questions that one could ask. So, and at the same time forbade them to eat of it. In this way, he precipitated the fall, which he apparently never intended. Similarly, his faithful servant Job is now to be exposed to a rigorous moral test quite gratuitously and to no purpose. And that's another thing I just like, it's just checking all the boxes of narcissism. And that's another thing that people with narcissism will do. They will create tests for you to see, well, one, I think to make sure you're still under their control, but also because they kind of just enjoy making other people uncomfortable. So they will do something not authentically or genuinely, but they will like ask you a question or something, or say something to you, reveal something to you to see if you react in a certain way, or to see how you will react, or to be entertained by your reaction. There's no authentic communication or exchange. So he also talks about, and this is the last thing I'll say, just because that's where I stopped for now. So in narcissism, basically, regardless of whether there's a supply being love bombed or not, it is the idea that there is great disdain for everybody. Like there is no human being that escapes the disdain of a narcissist. They have to basically belittle everyone and see everyone below them to uphold their image of themselves as God and as, the most righteous or the most loyal or the smartest, or, whatever they want to think of themselves, like whatever qualities they admire. And so this is also something that Jung says about the Hebrew God, at least as portrayed in, I guess, like the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures, specifically this book. It says, because of his littleness, and then now he's talking about Job, puniness and defenseless against the Almighty, he possesses, as we have already suggested, a somewhat keener consciousness based on self-reflection. He must, in order to survive, always be mindful of his impotence. God has no need of the circumspection, for nowhere does he come up against an insuperable obstacle that would force him to hesitate and hence make him reflect on himself. Could a suspicion have grown up in God that man possesses an infinitely small yet more concentrated light than he, Yahweh, possesses? So there's this paradox that there's a deep disdain for everyone. Even if you have a narcissistic parent, they actually despise and disdain their children. But there's always the sneaking suspicion that actually their romantic partner or their children or their partner, whoever it is that is in their like world, is actually better than them. And that is the whole I guess root of anyone who is a bully. It comes from overcompensating a deep insecurity about self. I mean, the reason that narcissists are the way they are is because they're desperate to avoid feeling any kind of shame or criticism, because that will just break them down. I mean, most people, I would say, like, it's human nature, like, to not enjoy feeling ashamed or shame or feeling bad because you've hurt someone or you've done something wrong or you've said something that's offensive, etc. I mean, we're all going to do these things. We're all human. We're all shadow and light. And so it might be like difficult for some people on their road to individuation to deal with those things, but a narcissist like won't even let themselves feel it, which is why it's hard to get a narcissist to take accountability and responsibility for themselves. Because in order to do that, in order to apologize sincerely and be sorry that you've hurt someone or you've said something stupid or whatever, you have to feel the feelings of empathy, and they just won't let themselves feel it because they're scared of it. So again, so I don't know where Jung is going to go with this. I'm on page 538 and it ends 640, 650. So I think it's going to take me a while to read this, at least a week or more, I think, just because I'm a slow reader. But yeah, I'll let you know. But so far, the psychological profiling is pretty interesting.